So as you know, 3 years ago, I think it was 3 years ago, I built this. I didn't follow code. I was able to save some cost on that by doing that. As you know, last year, I think it was last winter, you may remember, I had some moisture up in the attic. Fortunately, we didn't have any mold. And the reason we had moisture in the attic is I didn't design it correctly. I didn't build it correctly on purpose. My objective was to make a loft instead of an attic, so it would have a living space. I was going to insulate the peak and the floor, and everything was going to be nice and cozy. Well, I just never got around to it, and then Carolyn and I decided we just didn't want to do that. It didn't seem necessary after we moved into it. You may remember I put these louvers in there, put 3 on each side, and I know you're not going to be able to see this unless I get up real close, but I also drilled holes. I don't even know if you're going to see it if I get close. There, you might be able to see that. I drilled holes and put screens over it, and I think there's 5 or 6 on each side, so that gives out quite a bit of ventilation, and it dried up relatively fast. The thing is when I built it, people were sure that it was going to fall down. They were convinced of it. Actually, I had one guy tell me that he was going to buy a flapper for my wood stove because he thought the wood stove was done improperly. It wasn't. It was done to code. Actually, the wood stove was the only thing I know for sure. Every aspect of it was done to code. But he was convinced that it needed a flapper in the chimney, so he was going to buy one because he said, I would rather see it fall down to prove my point that it's a piece of junk than for it to burn down. Well, it's still here. And then with the porch, I don't think anybody understood how I was building the porch, and I still don't think they understood how I built the porch. The first snowstorm, it's gonna collapse. Well, we've had several snowstorms and it hasn't collapsed. It's strong enough that it could actually, if I took all the pieces of the truck off and laid it out evenly, it's strong enough to hold the truck. I used screws, and that, that was a big controversy. I'm not supposed to use screws. But here it sits, $5,000, and it's a nice little house. Thing is, I can't seem to convince very many people that this is, in today's economy, today's society, this is about the only way to go. I read an article not long ago, maybe a month ago, that says something to the effect, and I don't remember all the details, so you got to forgive me, and I couldn't find the article to bring it back up, but the economy has been worse for the last couple decades than it was in the Great Depression. Now, we all think that the Great Depression was a horrible event, and it was, but it's worse now, and we act like this is normal. But it's something like the unemployment rate is higher now than it was during the Great Depression, and income ratios and all that stuff they talk about in economics is worse than it was back in the Great Depression. So essentially, we've been in the Great Depression for the last couple of decades, and we're acting like it's totally fine. But when you really think about it, it's almost impossible to buy a house anymore for whatever reasons. And I'm not going to get into all the politics, and it's this president's fault. It's been decades. So we've had multiple parties, and everybody's had an opportunity to fix it, and nobody's fixed it. It's just the way it is. So a lot of the younger generation are staying home with their parents, or they're getting tiny houses. Now, I don't agree with buying one. I think buying a tiny house is way too expensive. They put too much glam, fancy stuff in it. It's not necessary. Carolyn used pallet wood. I think she bought one pallet of pallet wood to do the walls inside. You don't need walnut finish. You don't need all that junk. I saw one priced out at $94,000. Well, at that rate, just go get yourself a house. You could go get yourself a shed from Home Depot, and those are reasonable. I'm talking about this family that's going to live off grid, and they bought a shed, but they bought a used one or repossessed one or something, secondhand, and it looks pretty nice. So that's an option. You can get a bigger one for about the same price. I'm not going to tell you how much they spend. I don't know. I don't have their permission to do that. But I've always said you could buy one of these about this size for $5,000, And they bought a big one with a porch on it for just a little bit more. So that could be a way to go. But you got to find an area that you can do this in. We bought this during the pandemic, so the prices were a little high on lumber. So Carolyn found most everything on Facebook Marketplace. The OSB, the windows, the doors, the siding we got from Menards, and they delivered it. And the delivery cost was more expensive than the materials. And of course now, we had the trailer frame on the property, so that made a huge difference. I don't know how much it would cost to get a trailer frame. But if you can find a trailer frame relatively cheap, and the thing is if you look on Facebook Marketplace, I'm sure you could find one. A trailer, of course, you would have to disassemble it. And I get it, that people just don't want to work this hard. The other day I made a video about being debt-free and repossession, and I'll put an up next box at the end of this video to that video. And even if you've seen it, I would like for you to see it again. Just watch it, maybe make this video a little bit more sense, but there's no reason for me to cover that video. We can understand what it is to be debt-free, and we can understand to be behind paying your bills when you have debt. Now imagine you own a home, you've paid 10 years into it, and all of a sudden something happens, you lose your job, you get sick, and you lose your home. It happens a lot. In 2008, a lot of people lost their homes. They got suckered into crazy interest rates, and it's a sales pitch, and people buy into the sales pitch. And no matter how much I yabber on, or anybody yabbers on about being debt-free, somebody will come onto my channel, probably during a debt-free video, and say, but I just can't afford it. I have to buy it on credit. I have to. Well, no, you don't have to. You don't seem to understand. They always tell me that. You don't seem to understand. Like I'm some sort of idiot that I haven't went through life, that I don't understand things. I had debt. I had $50,000 worth of debt. I know what it's like. I understand being broke all the time, working your hindsight off and still being broke. So don't tell me I don't understand. I'm going to be clear. It's you that don't understand. If you're going to come on my channel and tell me I don't understand what it's like to be broke and in debt and can't afford my bills, it's you that don't understand. Because you can get out of it. And it's not as complicated as you may think. But it takes discipline. You got to stop spending money. Clear and simple. Stop. And people just aren't going to do it. I quit smoking. Right about the time I got debt free, I bought a vape to help me get off of it. It took me about a year to quit. And then I was able to save a ton of money. There's a lot of money. So no drinking, no cigarettes. So somebody's gonna tell me, but it's just too hard to quit smoking. I can't do it. I gotta have my pleasures in life. Well, then you don't want this. You don't want to have a stable life. You wanna just be poor. I used to have this woman that come to my channel all the time and tell me I just didn't understand. You got lucky finding that place. You got lucky saving money. I don't know how much luck there was involved in me becoming debt free. There was absolutely no luck. It was terrible. Got a divorce. My daughter, 14 years old, was in college. And I've talked about that. We homeschooled her. She was in college. So we had to get her to college. I had to give her a car. I must be the luckiest man in the world to have to spend that kind of money that fast. So no, I wasn't lucky. I just stopped spending money. And once you get out of the addiction of spending money, then you can become debt free. But this video I made the other day did very well in every measure. I don't understand why it did so well. It had a good click-through rate, which means that people saw the title, they were interested in the title, and they clicked it. So YouTube sends it out to a certain amount of people every hour, and based on how many people actually click that video, determines how many people they'll send it out to the next hour. So it had a really good click-through rate. Well, the other thing is if a lot of people are clicking the video, but they don't watch it all the way through, they will minimize how much they send it out to the next hour. Well, it had a fantastic watch time. So people are clicking the video, people are watching it, and it got a ton of views. my guess is folks were interested in me being debt free, is what I was talking about in that video. But then I got this question, well, what can I do? How do I do it? I don't understand. I got to pay rent. As long as I'm paying rent, I can't save any money. I can't become debt free. I'm just in this constant cycle. Okay, well, first let's talk about buying a piece of property like this on credit, because that's what that video was about. If you want to spend, let's say $1,000 per acre, and you want something modest, 8 acres. Now this one's only 1.5 acres, and it has a well. So there was an advantage, but I did 8 acres because I've had 8 acres. Carolyn had 8 acres in the past. 10% interest. I figured, I don't know what interest rates are anymore, but I figured 10% would maybe a fairly reasonable interest rate, that if you're going to have someone finance it for you, so you buy it from a guy who's going to finance it, he may say 10%. How many years are you going to pay on this? Well, I thought, well, okay, what is a reasonable amount of time to pay on a piece of property to a guy who's going to finance it for you? So I said 10 years. $8,000, 10 years, 10% interest rates. Now, here's what everybody's going to see. That's $105 a month. Oh, I can afford $105 a month. That's easy. But for how long? Until something goes wrong. Your car breaks down, you have a medical issue, you can't work 1 month, you get hurt, something can happen. I know, I've been there. I remember back in, it was January 1st, 1999, I was in a car accident. I was a passenger. I had a job, I had a pickup truck that I was paying on, I got hurt, and I lost it all. Lost my job, lost the truck. It was hard to recover from that. So it can happen. Then, so you got a $105 payment that eventually you're gonna not be able to pay. Something's gonna happen. But that's what everybody sees, is that $105. So the 10% interest rate I was telling you about. By the end of the loan, you will have spent an extra $4,596. Let's just round it up to $5,000. So it was $1,000 an acre, 8 acres, $8,000. If you could have saved that interest, you could have had an extra 5 acres. So why are you spending the interest? Get yourself 13 acres instead of 8. But somebody's going to say, well, as long as I'm paying this rent, I can't afford to just go out and buy a piece of property. That's where you're lucky. We made sacrifices, tons of sacrifices. One of the things we did to help get us on this property was we lived in this thing. Now we're tearing it apart, but we lived in this thing for a while, 3 years, 4 years. It was a truck camper that I made. Built it for about $500. We traveled around the country for a while. And then we set it on the ground and we lived in it for $500. That way you got something to live where you're not paying rent. Of course, you got to have some place to put it. I get it. But you have to start thinking, how can I get away from paying rent? The other thing is we bought this camper last year, or I guess this last spring, and it was $1,000. It's a piece of junk. It is falling apart. But I got our son back on our feet, and we'll use it until it just collapses on us, and then maybe we'll buy another one. But that's something you can live in. The problem is nobody wants to live in a piece of junk. Oh no, this thing's terrible. I mean, look at what I've had to do just to kind of hold the seams together. I know it looks terrible, but are you worried about how it looks, or are you worried about building yourself a tiny house in the future and something you can afford? So I got that on both sides because the seams were splitting. I'm going to have to repair the floor in the bedroom, and I'm not going to make that very difficult. A couple 2x2s and a piece of plywood. I'm not going to spend a lot of time and effort and money on it, because the objective is whatever it is you want to do. Build a tiny house, get a piece of property. In an area like this, if you can find a place like this, property is cheap. I mean, think about it. We bought this property. It had a well on it for $4,200. The well, and this is what's so incredible to me. The well would cost $5,000 to dig. So I would rather sacrifice, and a lot of people aren't going to do it. They're going to want the 8 acres and the well. But I was willing to sacrifice, say, okay, I don't need a huge piece of property, just something like put some chickens on a tiny house and some firewood, and apparently a camper, as long as it had the well. But I saw these people down here, they're in debt forever. They paid, I think it was 5 acres. I think they ended up paying $65,000 for a mobile home that didn't have a well. Why? Why would you do that? The guy who owned the place, he'll get it back and he'll sell it again at a higher price, as a matter of fact. I told you the story in that last video that I know somebody that ended up buying a piece of property 3 times because they lost it. Well, if I recall, I think they bought it for $1,000 an acre the first time they bought it, and by the time they were the 3rd time around, they ended up paying $1,200 an acre because the price of real estate went up over those years. So that guy made out like a bandit, the guy who was selling it. Don't go into debt. So if you click this up next box to take you to that video that I was talking about being debt free, so I hope I can inspire you to go debt free now so you can live your dreams. Thanks for watching.